Dragons, dragons, dragons. Hybrids, myths, legends. Whence do they come from? Where do they go? So there once was a story about Queen Olympia, in which Nectanebo, disguised as a dragon, impregnated her, and hence Philip of Macedon sprang. Well, this cuckoldry against Philip I of Macedon is well known. It's one of the stories about the divine progenitor, the divine provenance of Alexander of Macedon. Another story is that Philip I of Macedon was possessed by a dragon, and when inseminating Queen Olympia or Polyxena, what happened is that the dragon offspring spirited with the dragon. Alexander of Macedon was born. Now, what are the origins of the dragons? First things first, the first creatures that we may consider dragons as such, dragons only in name, were the Sumerian Mushhush, denote fearsome serpent, as originally dragons, the Oriental and the Occidental dragons, were connected with serpents. With the Mushhush, Mushhushu, associated with Marduk, the fearsome serpents guarding the order that Marduk has carved out of the universe. And the later Egyptian holy serpents, the feathered serpents, the Agathos daimones, with the birds and all that. Perhaps it is linked to certain mysteries, which I won't betray right now. Now, let us move. This is the forgotten history of the cults of the serpents and dragons. So, how do we come about with the dragons? There are several ideas, methodologies in approaching the very form of a dragon. First is the Finnish historical geographical method of reconstruction, folkloristic reconstruction. B, there is the anthropological perspective, sociobiological perspective, the innate releasing mechanism, the imprints, the biological imprints that might have occurred sometime in 23 to 5 million years ago. This was conditioned by the instinct of fear towards the serpents. So here we have the echoes of our good old dinosaurs, Saurolophus and Tarbosaurus, from around 70 to 66.6 million years ago, from the museum in Ulaanbaatar. If all animals have souls and humans have souls, then don't deprive the old dinosaurs of their souls and rectifications. But that's another matter. So the instinct of fear, the savanna monkey, Kotabits, I forget the name, and the first known ornamentation that represents a dragon in China was the ornament of the double dragon from Henan, 3000 to 3,500 years before modern era. Now, here in Dragonology, we need to discern between the Occidental and Oriental or Far Eastern dragons. So the Western dragons, their iconography is heterogenic. They are often hybrids of animals, and they have a symbolical content that is usually evil, although not always, as we may see. There were masters and mistresses of Dracontes like Apollo, Heracles, Athene, Athenae, Medea, and others. There were snake master races, not in the sense of reptilians, no. Returning to our ideas, they were considered mortal, or they could be slayed. Now, let's not believe in the lies of that. Let us move to the Eastern dragons, and the iconography contains 9 homogenic types. The symbolic content meant that they had varied natures, and they were immortal. They could be only temporarily contained. If they were reborn as mortals, they could be slain in mortal human animal flesh, but their spirits were immortal. Now, the further discernment amongst the typology of mythopoeia of the dragons, We have the Chinese dragons, the Longguang, the King, Dragon King. We have the Tianlong, or the Starry Dragon that is guarding the heavens, Shenlong, the Divine Dragon, the Dilong, or the Earthly Dragon, Fuzanglong, the one who guards secrets, Nilong, an evil dragon, often portrayed with a human face. Now the Hindi dragons were the Nagas. There were the heavenly Nagas, the divine Nagas, the earthly Nagas, the hidden Nagas. We have the Greco-Roman Dracontes, as mentioned before, the pure Dracontes, for example, Hydra or Colchis of Medea, and Jason, to be slain by Medea the queen. The combined Dracontes, like Typhon, Echidna, Medusa, the water Dracontes, Ketes, Scylla, as mentioned before, masters and mistresses of Dracontes, and the phantom Dracontes that were combined as Erinia, and they were associated with the physis aspect of Hecate. Dracontes were also combined in aspected, for example, of Zeus aspects, Zeus Meilichios, the underground Jupiter, or the chthonic aspect of Jupiter, as well as healing Dracontes, as Asclepius, just like we see in the modern apothecaries and pharmacies. These are symbols of dracons, of dragons, of serpents, Hygieia Amphiarus. So, moving through it, as I mentioned, the Dracontes. This is quite an interesting excerpt from a paper on Dracontes, because at the very first, Christians couldn't kind of figure out how to present Jesus as a representable person in the Roman society, because he didn't have a wife. So one John of Patmos of Apocalypse tried to marry him to Artemis, Hecate, the goddess of Dracontes. He failed utterly, and hence he started destroying the cults of Artemis Hecate, and he was a naughty boy. So what do we have here? Apart from Mitrite connections, Drakainan. In his paper Leivo has found one passage by John Chrysostom where Artemis is characterized as Drakaina, whereas Ecclesia, the Christian church, as Nymphe, the bride of Christ. The church as bride is a very common image in Christian thought, but why is it linked here with Artemis Drakaina? Could we have a subtle allusion to pagan religious terminology? There is, of course, no definite answer to this question and to its pertinence to the expression Nymphe Drakaina in our inscription. In the light of what was said above about the link between Hecate and the dragons and her frequent identification with Artemis, it is in any case worthwhile noticing the occurrence of an Artemis Drakaina in this Chrysostomian passage. We may be reminded of the grove of Artemis in Phrygia, dwelling place of a Draconteon, Megistos ten Ophis, or the Medea to whom Artemis came, Epidraconton Okoumneni, riding upon dragons. I do apologize, I'm disturbed while trying to reading it. Neoplatonist Proclus advised invoking Artemis as Speirodracontozonos, girt with coils of dragons, the same rare epithet that we saw above as referring to Hecate. So, as we know, that loser Jesus, illiterate idiot, had nothing to do with Artemis Hecate. He was an irrelevant Jew, but somehow this political toy had to be justified. They failed, so they married him to ecclesiastikoi, or the church. Now, that was already mentioned. Mushhushu. Okay, now, for the Eastern perspective, Confucius said, "This sage is trustworthy indeed. This is said of shading one's culture when, and keeping tranquil and yet necessarily being seen. If the dragon transforms 70 times and yet is not able to lose its markings, when?" Slight mark towards the mark of Buddhas. Then the markings are trustworthy and reach the virtue of spiritual brightness. Reminds me of the Vajra school, of the divine Vajra symbol, the lightnings of heavens, also connected with the Book of Changes and the cyclicity of certain events. Now, how was the Christian dragon born? Well, someone mistranslated Ophis into Drakon. So from Aramaic, they mistranslated into Greek, and then mistranslated into the Vulgata as the dragon. So the serpent hence became evil in the Judeo-Christian idea. This was the battle of Jah, the Jewish god, with Leviathan and Rahab. They were translated in Septuagint as Drakon, Ophis, and Ketos. And what's the whole deal about the seven-headed dragon from Apocalypse? Well, originally it was belonging to the kings and queens of Babylon, and it meant the command over the seven spheres of the planets, or symbolically being crowned by them in order to command on behalf of the gods over the human cattle. So these mysteries were destroyed and slandered, and sometimes resurfacing in modern day as the Thelemite ideas that are a bit twisted, but that's none of my business. Now, the solar uraic Ophic currents, the ecogenetic theory of bioplants, the Sumerian, Egyptian, Babylonian tree of life. In Babylon, in Sumer, the tree of life was called Mesh. In Egypt, there was a goddess, Lady Sapseshat, and Tot inscribing the tree of life upon the king, upon the queen, upon the pharaoh, and the mistress. So these were the mysteries that immortalized human beings, and yes, that's another little infographic I've made. That's the regular uraic serpent enwingment, or the enwingment of the soul based on serpent traditions and serpent cults. And the other part is representing Theon Ergon, or becoming immortalized by the gods themselves, if one deserves that. So, the dream of every Egyptian in the later kingdom, or in the most... You see, I'm talking about mysteries that are forbidden to those pigs, hence they need to attack me. So the dream of every Egyptian to become like little Isis and little Osiris, in order to recombine themselves into divine androgynes. And what happened is that Judeo-Christian swine were so jealous because they were blocked from those mysteries for destroying them. Jew-Christian never will reach those mysteries. They are prisoners and slaves, and they perfectly know it. They want to create more slaves. They cannot go beyond Earth to the heavenly spheres. And long story short, those fucking pigs slandered all the draconian dragon mysteries, serpent mysteries, hence they are not allowed to do anything but to trouble, pester and shit-shice people like me, trying to enslave them. Yet, when you bypass it all and walk with the gods, you can shit all over the Judeo-Christian establishment, and all they can do is trash you and talk shice. So, I wish you a Chronos day that will liberate you according to your walk. And discard Judeo-Christian bullshit. That's an invention of Jews, jealous Jews, value revanchist creatures, pig creatures, just like Christian pigs. And they will never reach the stars. Thank you. Have a grand Drakon success.